If it matters to you, it matters to us. Call Tip today on 1800 938 007.
And it's time for this.
The Conspiracy Files on Tip today.
Now, Ellie, you have a conspiracy for us. This is one I'm really, really interested in, and it scares the pants off me, to be honest.
Well, it does, and I suppose it's something that I think is probably more common than you think, because I think many of us have experienced some sign or maybe message from a deceased loved one. Now, it could be that you felt their presence so strongly that it was like they were physically there with you. Or here in Ireland, one that's very popular, of course, is the robin landing on your windowsill after, or animals visiting after someone has passed away. Now, there is something deeply mystical about these encounters. And while they leave you feeling supported and strengthened despite the grief or loss, they often stand out as a very special event, making us sit up and pay attention. But the question in it is, could it be the spirit of the dead person that's trying to communicate with us? Are we receiving a message from beyond to let us know that they are okay? Then as quickly as that wonder will arise, it's often snuffed out as just coincidence or a figment of your imagination, or something that you're deeply seeking that you will find where you can. Now, we've been deeply conditioned as well by rational social convention to dismiss these very brief moments of deep connection. Of course, we're taught to trust the physically seen and felt rather than our own gut feelings or invisible inklings. And we're taught that there's no such thing as spirit communication. But then, wasn't there also a deep knowing that it was a sign from our deceased loved ones? So it's an interesting topic. Now, I think most of us can probably identify some sign or what we feel maybe is some interpretation of a loved one contacting us. But there are a lot of documented and really incredible stories from people who do claim and who are adamant that their loved ones used technology to contact them after they passed away, which is a very interesting aspect of it. And that's the focus of this episode, Calls from Beyond the Grave. So the one we're going to start with is Dean Koontz, who's a very well-known author. Many people will know who he is, will have read some of his books. Of course, he's an international best-selling science fiction writer. But an interesting story that he has told in the past. On the 20th of September of 1988, Dean had an experience that he would not write about for nearly a decade. But he claimed in his essay called Beautiful Death that it was this encounter that absolutely convinced him that there is life after death. Here's what happened to Dean Koontz.
In 1988, Koontz received a strange phone call from what sounded like a woman. The person from the other line simply said, "Please be careful." According to the author, the voice sounded very distant, although he could still clearly hear the woman. She repeated the warning 3 times, and each time she said it, the sounds became more distant than the last. Koontz said that although he didn't know who the caller was, he could still surmise that the person sounded very much like his mother. The thing is, Koontz's mother died 20 years ago. A few days later, Koontz went to visit his father, who was then residing in a facility. The old man apparently had some behavioral issues and had recently assaulted someone. When Dean came, his father grabbed a knife. Koontz had to wrestle his father to get the knife. When the police arrived, they thought Koontz was the perpetrator and ordered him to drop the knife, or else they would shoot. He did so accordingly and averted the crisis. Koontz realized that the phone call was meant for him to become more vigilant.
Well, why didn't he document it, Ellie, for 10 years?
He didn't think anyone would believe him, and he spent years convincing himself that it didn't happen, that it might have been a phone call from somebody else that he interpreted differently, and that it was only after what happened with his father. He never really held much relevance in that phone call before that attack by his father.
Right, okay.
Now, there was only a couple of weeks between those incidents, but he never truly believed it. And I think after a few years, and he is a science fiction writer, so he would be open-minded.
Yes.
So as he looked back on his life, he realised that that was a real pivotal moment in his life and a warning that came to him.
What about Charles Peck?
Charles Peck is a very interesting story and a relatively recent one, because this happened just in 2008. And on September 12th of that year at 4:22 p.m, It happened in California's San Fernando Valley, where a commuter train carrying 225 people collided at a combined speed of 83 miles per hour with a freight train run by a crew of 3. Now, it became known as the Chatsworth crash. Now, ultimately, 135 people were injured and 25 people were killed in that crash. Now, one of those people was 49-year-old Charles E. Peck. Now, he had come to Los Angeles for a job interview. He had 3 grown-up children from a previous marriage. His fiancée actually heard about the crash from a news report on the radio as she was driving to the train station to pick him up. So as she continued on her journey to try and get some news, Charles's parents and siblings and his children, they all joined her as well as they waited for news on him. What happened then was that for 11 hours after that crash, Charles' phone placed call after call to his loved ones. It called his son, his brother, his stepmother, his sister, and his fiancée. As a result of those calls, they believed that he was trapped inside and trying to get out and trying to contact them for help. Here's his fiancée Andrea talking to a local news station about what happened.
She was on her way to pick him up from the Metrolink station when she heard the news on the radio. She knew immediately he was on that train, but was he alive? And then they got the first call. It was to Chuck's son in Utah.
And he said, "My dad just called me." And I said, "What did he say? Where is he? Is he okay?" He didn't say anything. The phone rang and it said, "Dad."
They watched the tormenting search for survivors, certain that Chuck was alive and trapped in the wreckage. Between Chuck's kids and other family members, about 36 calls were made from Chuck's phone, but there was only static and silence. And then almost 5 hours after the collision, at 9:08, Andrea got a call.
And we were yelling in the phone, hang in there, baby. We're going to get you out. You're going to be okay.
It was the hope they needed. And when the rescue efforts were about to turn to recovery, there was another call. And that prompted search crews to trace it. It was coming from the first train. So they went back in one last time.
And they were so excited. They had this incredible adrenaline rush at the thought that they could possibly go find another survivor. And we gave her a description, and they spent the next couple of hours looking for him. And they did end up finding him, and they said that he had died immediately on impact, and there was no way he could have been calling us.
She believes those phone calls got them through the night and helped them find Chuck's body.
The intellectual side of my brain thinks, gee, it was a computer malfunction, and the emotional side of my brain it was just Chuck letting us know that he knew that we were scared for him and letting us have hope.
And she's also comforted by the fact that they were happy, ready to get married and start their new life together. She believes he was riding that train with a smile.
He died instantly and he didn't suffer. And when you love somebody, you couldn't ask for a better way for them to leave this life. Just happy and excited and didn't see it coming.
And they may never find out exactly how those calls were made because Chuck's phone was never found. Reporting from News Center, Lynette Romero, back to you in the studio.
Wow, I love the final line. The phone was never found.
Never found. No, never found. So they don't know. They weren't able to get the phone to test. Was it some glitch that maybe the phone was leaning in such a way or had been damaged in such a way that it was just continually ringing everyone in his favourites list? That's the theory when it comes to Charles, but his family don't believe that.
Right, but he was killed instantly.
Instantly.
Right.
Yeah.
Lorraine Evans, Ali.
Lorraine Evans is another interesting one. Lorraine was a loving mother, wife and friend, lived a very normal life in a quiet town, worked as a nurse raising her family, but in early 2008, tragedy struck when she was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Now, despite her condition, Lorraine remained positive, spending her final days surrounded by her family and loved ones. She sadly passed away on March 14th of 2008, peacefully in her sleep. Now, her family, of course, mourned. They held a funeral and tried to move forward. But then, just days after she died, the phone started ringing. So 2 weeks after Lorraine's death, her daughter, Sarah Evans, was at home when her phone rang. The caller ID displayed her mother's name. Sarah obviously was very frightened by this. She answered, half expecting a mistake, that maybe it was a telemarketer or a wrong number, but there was only silence. Then she said she could hear a faint whisper. Now, she dropped the phone in shock, and when she checked the call log after, it was undeniably her mother's number. but her phone had actually been disconnected after her death. Over the next month then, 12 more calls came through, each one more unsettling than the last. So desperate for answers, Sarah contacted the phone company. The representative for the phone company did confirm that Lorraine's line had been deactivated the day after her death. So no outgoing calls should have been possible on that. But the call logs do show 13 outgoing calls, all from Lorraine's number. But even more chilling with it, each call lasted exactly 13 seconds. Wow. So was it a glitch, was it a cruel prank, or was it something sinister? Well, this was investigated because word of the 13 phone calls spread quickly. Paranormal researchers and tech experts both separately examined the case, and they've offered several theories for it. Now, the tech experts say it could have been a technical glitch, that there might have been a system error somewhere where old calls were replayed due to a server malfunction, although phone companies denied this was possible. It could have also been a hoax, of course. Skeptics accused the family of fabricating the story. But remember, you have the phone records and multiple witnesses confirming that the calls actually did happen. Now, could it have been a message from beyond? Because mediums claimed that Lorraine was trying to communicate. And what they find very notable in Lorraine's case is that it was 13 calls, each lasting for 13 seconds. And 13 carries a very a spiritual significance because it is the number of transformation in numerology. But no definitive reason has ever really been given. Now, on the topic of phone calls from beyond, there is a very well-known book on the topic, and it's called Phone Calls from the Dead. Straightforward enough. And it was the result of a 2-year investigation into this phenomenon, and it was carried out by parapsychologists D. Scott Rogo and Raymond Bayless. A lot of interesting stories contained and verified in this book. Here is one of them.
The Gelb incident. So Dr. Lester Gelb, a psychoanalyst from Riverdale, New York, was preparing to leave home for a family outing when the phone rang. He answered, and one single word came. Lester, spoken in the unmistakable voice of his deceased mother. She had died months earlier, but this wasn't a faint whisper. He described the voice as vivid and clear and emotionally distinct. She had a particular crackle, a tone, a manner of speaking that he knew intimately. It was her. He asked repeatedly for the caller's identity, but the voice simply repeated his name again and again, and then came a sharp, clacking sound, and the line went dead. He was deeply affected, but remained professionally sceptical. He told investigators, "I don't have a clear explanation for what I experience. Therefore, I remain intrigued."
Intrigued, indeed. Claims of communication from the dead, it's not a new phenomenon.
No, it's certainly not. Like, it's existed since even before we've done. It's not just a phone issue. I mean, there's been stories of it there since we've had even the most basic of technology. There was also reports of it happening with Morse code, interestingly enough.
Wow.
And there was a very famous case in London in the early 1900s. Here's the background to that case.
One of the earliest reports of phantom phone calls dates back to the early 20th century, when a London solicitor, David Wilson, received bizarre messages on a machine he had made himself from a wireless telegraph. Devised to use the Morse code system, Wilson's communication machine first received strange messages in 1913 when used by his friend. The signals were delivered in Morse as audible beeps. Astonishingly, the device continued to relay messages even after the receiving wire had been disconnected. With the help of a second witness, Wilson translated each message as they came through. The telephonic messages the machine received appeared to be meaningful. In January 1915, this was received. Great difficulty, await message, 5 days, 6 evening. Similar instructional phrases like wait until next Tuesday also came through. However, despite waiting, nothing ever happened that illuminated on the message's meanings. Confused as to why he was receiving such messages without any input, the solicitor invited researchers to inspect his machine and try to explain the source of the Morse code. No explanation and no source of the signal could be found. After publishing his experiments, David Wilson and his Morse code communications disappeared from the records.
All right, Ellie, so we can guess what the science is going to say on this, but, I mean, there's so much of it that it's hard to dismiss it, isn't it?
Well, there is, because science will tell you that it could be anything from a glitch in the system, static or missed dials. Many people report receiving unexplained calls, even texts and voicemails as well from dead loved ones. They are nearly always described as being static filled. You can often hear a faint voice maybe in the background or a whisper. And it suggests a spiritual attempt at connection, even if the mechanism remains a mystery. Now, it does frequently occur, those reports of these kind of phenomena, they tend to occur very soon after a death in the family. Now, while the exact cause is unknown, some believe spirits can actually use electronic fields as a way of communicating and sending a message maybe that they're okay. So if you look at the various scientific and skeptical views, if you're looking at technical glitches, calls might be delayed. I mean, that is a possibility. And maybe they only reach the phone after a person has died or after numbers have been reassigned and it's some sort of settling issue with a new number. If you also look at the psychological comfort, now these experiences, I'm sure while surprising and while a bit frightening, they can also be very comforting. And they can offer a sense of continued connection, which psychology explores as a coping mechanism. But on the other side of that, skeptics will say that it's something that's created in the mind of the bereaved. Also,
a coping
absolutely,
mechanism.
Yeah. If you look at the paranormal perspective, the spiritual communication, some believe that spirits can have the ability to use technology like phones, also like Morse code, like we heard, and they can use electrical fields as a medium for contact or communication. Now, there has been research conducted on this topic as well, because organisations have funded studies. Like King's University College has researched these claims from both physical and spiritual angles, also exploring how spirits might interact with technology. So in essence, whether dead people can actually call you remains a mystery. But that experience, as you've heard, of receiving these calls is a widespread phenomenon. It's not rare. And people will attribute to both technological anomalies and also to spiritual phenomena, depending on your background and your own beliefs.
Yeah, but I mean, if you do believe that when you die, you go on to some other realm or something like that, you can understand why technology might be a way to communicate as opposed to a personal communication, if you know what I mean, Ali.
That's true. And yeah, and you remember, it all goes in phases too, but I find with contact from the grave, this is one that has evolved with technology, because if you look at how we would have interpreted paralogical and paranormal events in the past, like you would have had the exoplasm, remember that, where you would have taken pictures of, that wouldn't go now. I mean, nobody would take that seriously now. There was also a famous one during the 70s where you take photographs of televisions. Remember that one? And the pictures of the dead people would then be seen afterwards in the screen of the television.
Oh, right. Okay.
So it does tend to follow a pattern depending on our technology as well. That would also go along with the Morse code, with phones. Interestingly, computers haven't been really used for communication. It tends to be
it's very interesting.
Telephones.
Well,
yeah.
you would really be surprised if you got an email.
Imagine, yeah. To whom it may concern.
Did you ever have an experience?
I don't think so.
I mean, we've all had the robins and
yeah. You see, the robin is a big thing especially in Ireland.
Yeah.
No, like we would mock that a lot in our family.
I played a gig in Ballyedmond in Wexford, and a butterfly, I think it was a red admiral, came down onto the keyboard, and I sat on the keyboard while I played. And that was fine, and I took a photograph of it because it was just stayed throughout the whole gig. It must be a country music fan. But anyway, the next time I went to Ballyedmond to play, another butterfly, or maybe the same butterfly, I don't know, came back down onto the keyboard, and I have photographs to prove it.
That's interesting.
Now, there's no reason why a butterfly should have been in the place to begin with, and I think they might have been out of season. I don't know.
That's very interesting. Did it, at the time, did it strike you as a message?
Kind of, a
Right.
little bit. But then again, I don't know, was I trying to impose maybe what might suit me to impose on it, you know? I
know a family who they suffered a very sudden and tragic loss of a young man in the family. And during the wake at their home, there was a kitten that arrived at the door that everyone fussed over for a couple of days. And then once their son had left and had been buried, the kitten was gone and had disappeared. And they still maintained that day that kitten was somehow linked to him, that it was some comfort. So
it's interesting.
It's interesting, yeah.
Isn't it indeed? Contact from Beyond the Grave. Ellie, thanks very much indeed for that. Ellie looks after content. Leanne was producing today. Stephen is on the way with the Time Tunnel on the lunchtime show, and I'll talk to you tomorrow from Nina. Look after yourselves, won't you? Bye-bye.
Tip FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Main Peugeot dealers in the Premier County. And now stocking the full range of the luxury French car brand DS Automobiles. Book your test drive today with Slattery's Garage, Puck On. See slatterysgarage.ie.